Hey everybody, this is Brian with Bear Cards 34, and I'm coming back with another show and tell video. This is one that I've been looking forward to doing for a really long time. I wanted to wait until I had the complete sets for both 1984 and 85 Topps USFL football cards. And if you watch my channel, you know that in a recent mail day, I finally picked up the last card I needed for the set, and that was Jim Kelly. And so I have decided to start off with Jim Kelly on this video. I'm not going to do a deep dive into the USFL itself. There is a great documentary called Small Potatoes that I highly recommend if you're interested in learning more about the USFL or the United States Football League. They only had 3 seasons that they played. They were founded in 1982, and the seasons first started in 1983. They had 18-game seasons, and it was considered an alternative to the NFL and college football, who were inactive during the spring and the summer. And what happened was the USFL threw a lot of money around. They were signing some big-name players out of college, like Jim Kelly, among others. And they also signed some pretty notable NFL veterans, as well as some veterans who were aging and kind of on their last run. And it got a lot of attention, and it's very notable for the stars that would come from the league. But also, it was a lot of fun for the people who were a fan of that league. Now, by 1986, they had a real clash with the NFL. They were trying to play at the same time as the NFL, to compete with the NFL, but they were spending so much money, they weren't bringing as much in. There was a big court lawsuit with the NFL, which the USFL did win, but they won $1 in damages, and they just couldn't sustain. They had lost over $160 million. And so that's why after those 3 seasons they folded. We see a lot of rookie cards for NFL players in 1986 and 1987, and it was because of the league folding. So anyway, it did have a significant impact. These cards, it's a 132 card set for both the 84 and 85 set. They were not in packs. They were in little boxes that you would buy, kind of like the Topps Traded and things like that. There were a handful of notable players who never had a USFL card, like Gary Zimmerman, Nate Newton, some of those players, Kent Hull for the Bills as well. But a lot of great players were featured in this set. And so we'll go ahead and start off here with Jim Kelly. Now, Jim Kelly was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he had a great high school career. He had 44 touchdowns and only 1 interception during high school. And despite that, Penn State recruited him and wanted him to play for them, but they wanted him to play linebacker. Thankfully, he said no to that. He went to Miami, and Lou Saban, the coach there, had guaranteed that Kelly would play football. Now, I do want to show, just for the time period, I normally don't purchase cards like these. These are not legit cards, but they do kind of showcase when these cards would have come out. So that rookie or XRC of Jim Kelly came out at the same time as those 84 Topps, and those second-year cards came out at the same time as the 85 Topps. Now, had the league not folded in 86, we would have also seen cards coming out the same year as that. However, that was not the case. Now, Jim Kelly did not have a 1986 Topps card made, so his rookie is the 1987 Topps. So Jim Kelly, the non-linebacker quarterback at Miami, played fantastic. He played well enough to be the 14th player pick in that historic 1983 NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills. And Kelly at the time did not want to play in a cold weather area, and Buffalo certainly is cold weather. And he was actually just about to sign his rookie contract with the Bills despite that. However, he then became notified that the USFL was willing to pay for his services, and so he put a halt on that. And he ended up signing with Houston, the Houston Gamblers, and became the starting quarterback for them. He was fantastic in the USFL. He was the MVP in 1984, where he threw for over 5,200 yards and had 44 touchdowns. He played 84 and 85 with Houston. He did not play there in 1983, and the reason for that was that he had to sit out because the Gamblers didn't actually play until February of 1984. So he was drafted, signed with the USFL in 83, but he didn't play that year. And once they folded, the Gamblers, Kelly signed with the New Jersey Generals, but then the league folded soon after that. So basically, he went from being on the Gamblers to signing with the Generals, and then the whole league collapsed, and he ended up going over to Buffalo despite not wanting to play in cold weather. And so the Bills' investment finally paid off. He ended up hooking up with the Bills, becoming part of that no-huddle offense. Andre Reed was there, as well as Bruce Smith. They had some of the building blocks of what was to come, and a couple years later drafted Thurman Thomas, who's just a fantastic all-around running back. So having these weapons around him and all of this talent, Jim Kelly went on to have a Hall of Fame career. He became embraced by Buffalo, and he ended up loving Buffalo. He still does. He's a diehard Bills fan. He loves Buffalo to this day, and it's great to see, his early kind of opinions of that really evolve over time, and he's really been adopted by that city. Jim Kelly, during his time in the USFL, was a two-time USFL All-League team, the 84 Rookie of the Year and MVP, and he was part of the USFL All-Time Team. He played there for 2 years, and he had 83 touchdowns during that time. I also have this card of him in his Miami days, an elite insert with Brad Kaya as well. But the Jim Kelly right there, nice little card. And during his time in Buffalo, he went on to become one of the most successful, one of the most winningest quarterbacks, 5-time Pro Bowler. In 1990, he led the NFL in passer rating and completions. In 1991, he was the NFL passing touchdown leader. And by the time he retired, just a legend in Buffalo. He is on the Buffalo Wall of Fame. His number 12 is retired. And the thing that he's most known for, I believe, is that he led the Bills to 4 straight Super Bowl appearances. No other team has done that. 4 straight AFC titles and Super Bowl appearances. I know in more recent years he had battled jaw cancer, and he appears to be cancer-free, appears to be doing quite well, and just an all-around great player. And I'm so thrilled to finally have that 1984 Topps Jim Kelly card there. Next up, we've got Luther Bradley, and I do want to kind of mention here, you see him on the Wranglers there on the left, and then you see him on the Gamblers in the middle. So my idea with this show and tell is that I'll be including both sets in the series. So right now I'm going through the 84 Topps, and then anyone from the 84 Topps who also has an 85 card I'm including, as well as any other notable cards that I might throw in there. There will be a series of this. I'm not sure how many videos. This is just kind of a run through to get an idea. But like always, these are a deep dive into the players and the sets of that time. So the reason I included Luther Bradley was, for starters, in college, he was fantastic. A 2-time national champ at Notre Dame, go Irish. And in 1977, he was an All-American. He was the Lions' first-round draft pick in 1978. And that on the right there is his 1980 Topps rookie card. He signed with the Arizona Wranglers in 1984. And then he played 1985 with the Houston Gamblers, which was his final year of pro football. And the reason I'm bringing him up more than anything else is, and here's a trivia question for you if it ever comes up, he is the USFL's all-time interception leader. He had 28 interceptions in 3 years. In both 1983 and 1985, he had 12 interceptions, one of which he returned 93 yards for a touchdown. So definitely one of the all-time great USFL players. And I know when I say that, it was only 3 seasons, but really if we're looking at who made an impact, Luther Bradley is definitely one of those guys. Next up, we've got Tremaine Johnson. He was one of the most dominant players of the USFL. He only played there for 2 years with 2 different teams. He played for the Chicago Blitz his first year, and he led the USFL with 81 catches, over 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And then he went over to the Arizona Wranglers for his second season, where he had 90 receptions, 1,250 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So 2 years in the USFL, 2-time All-USFL player, and the NFL came calling. He signed a contract and played 2 years with the Chargers and another 2 with the Bills. I think in his NFL career he had a little over 1,000 yards receiving, so never matched anywhere near the success he had in the USFL. This is his only card. I do believe he had at least one McDonald's card, however, but as far as the USFL, this was it. But a great player in the USFL. Next up, we've got Greg Landry. So we went from Jim Kelly, one of the young guns in the NFL, to come out to the NFL. This guy, Greg Landry, had been around a long time in the league before he went over to the USFL. Definitely one of the old-timers in the league. Now, he was a first-round draft pick back in 1968 by the Detroit Lions out of UMass, where he had set a lot of records. He was the first quarterback chosen back in 68, and this is his rookie card right here. Now, he had already played 3 years by the time that card came out, but it just shows how long he had been in the league up to that point. And he had some notable success in the NFL. He played 11 years with the Lions. His best year was 1971, where he was a first-team All-Pro and made the Pro Bowl. And right here, this cool, it's off-centered, but it's a nice-looking card. This 1971 passing leader. So you've got Staubach, number 1, and then Greg Landry right there, number 2, next to Bill Kilmer. So very successful year from him. He was also good at running the ball. He had a 76-yard quarterback run, which was the longest in the history at that time. That was back in 1970. In 1976, he was the NFL's Comeback Player of the Year. And in 1977, he got benched. He requested a trade. And in 1979, he joined the Baltimore Colts as a backup for Burt Jones. But Burt Jones got injured. And during that year, he threw for almost 3,000 yards with 15 touchdowns. In 1983, he joined the USFL playing for the Chicago Blitz. And then 84 with the Arizona Wranglers. And he had 6,000 passing yards with 42 touchdowns during his time there. Now, he actually did go back to the NFL when he was 38 years old in 1984, with both Jim McMahon and Steve Fuller injured. Greg Landry actually came in. He had been the emergency backup for the Chicago Bears, and he had one final start with the Bears in 1984. He threw for 200 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, he also had 3 interceptions. However, the Bears did win the game. So he spent some time after his playing days on the Chicago Bears coaching staff from 1986 to 1992, helping out with Mike Ditka. So he has some Bear tie-ins there as well. But cool story to have him. I'm glad he was featured in that USFL set for sure. Next up, we've got Tim Spencer. He had a very successful career at Ohio State, and then he was drafted in the USFL by the Chicago Blitz in '83. He ran for 1,157 yards as a rookie. With the Arizona Wranglers in '84, he had 1,212 yards and 17 touchdowns. So very successful in the USFL. It should be noted, I'm going to mention this, you'll notice that some of these guys, when I mentioned the Blitz and then the Wranglers, this was pretty interesting, and you wouldn't see this happen again. But before the 1984 season, the Chicago Blitz and the Arizona Wranglers, they did a full franchise swap. So the '84 Wranglers are basically the '83 Blitz and vice versa. So there you go. Pretty interesting stuff. His final year was with the Memphis Showboats in 1985, and he ended his USFL career with over 3,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving. He had 30 touchdowns. He played in '85 with the San Diego Chargers, and that's his rookie card on the right from '86 Topps. They drafted him in 1983 in the 11th round, and when the league folded, they were able to pick him up, and he was quite good for them. He had 10 touchdowns as an NFL rookie in 1985, and he was still on the team, even a little later when the sports card market started to really explode. He was a solid running back through the 1990 season, and another Bears tie-in. He was the running back coach for Chicago from 2004 to 2012. Next up, we've got Stan White, another one of those guys who joined the USFL later in his career. He was drafted in the 17th round back in 1972. 437 players were picked before him, despite being an All-American at Ohio State. He also played baseball and basketball, a great athlete. He went on to have a very successful NFL career. He was a first-team All-NFL player in 1975 and 77, and he holds the NFL record for the most interceptions in a season by a linebacker with 8, which was done in 1975, the year of his NFL rookie card that you see right there. And he had 34 interceptions in his career. He's part of the all-time Baltimore Colts team, played 3 years with the Lions, and then he was on to the Chicago Blitz, and like all the other Blitz players, became a Wrangler the year later. That was his final season, 1984. He had 2 interceptions, 1 per year, including a 24-yard touchdown interception return in 1984. He also had 7 quarterback sacks in the USFL. And he's been in Baltimore since then on the radio as a sports analyst, so he's probably pretty familiar with people in the Baltimore area even today. Next up is Buddy Adelet, or Adeletti. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. I didn't know of this guy until I was looking at the all-time great USFL players, and he's considered one of those. He played his college ball at Alabama. In 1980, he was with the Green Bay Packers, but then he was out of football for a couple of years until the USFL came calling. He was a three-time All-USFL team with Birmingham Stallions, who had a really dominant rushing and passing offense. Then he played 2 years with the Steelers to finish out his pro career. But as far as the USFL goes, he was considered one of the all-time greats for them. Next up is Tom Banks. He was an 8th-round draft pick back in 1970 by the St. Louis Cardinals out of Auburn. He went on to have 11 really good years with the Cardinals, including 4 Pro Bowls. His best year was in 77, where he was an All-Pro, and you'll see here on the 79 Topps card, after the 78 season, he was a part of the All-Pro team as well. He then went on to play for the Stallions. That was actually his hometown growing up, and he really was happy to be able to go back and play there. There's an interview with him talking about his 11-year-old son or 12-year-old son being old enough to really know what was going on, and how he was so happy that his son could go and see him play during the home games for the Stallions. So just a great player right there, and definitely wanted to include him in this as well. Next up is Joe Cribbs, and he was one of the bigger NFL veterans to move over to the USFL. He had a great career with the Bills leading up to his time in the USFL, a second-round draft pick in 1980 out of Auburn. He was the 79 Player of the Year for the SEC, just had a great college career and jumped right into the NFL and became the AFL Rookie of the Year and made the Pro Bowl and an All-Pro, as you can see there on the Topps card, during his rookie season. That's his 81 Topps rookie card. He also had a Super Action card. And during his time there, he was very, very talented and did quite a bit of success, had quite a bit of success. He had 1,000 yards rushing in 3 of his 4 years with the Buffalo Bills. The only year he didn't have 1,000 yards was the strike-shortened season of 1982, and he was a 3-time Pro Bowler during those 4 seasons. So as you can see, just a very, very talented running back. However, he ended up having a contract dispute with the Bills in 1984, and so that's why he signed with the Stallions to a big contract there. It ended up having this thing where Joe Cribbs was not supposed to be able to play for any other team. In his contract, it had said that. However, it was that no NFL team could sign him. And so because he had signed his contract back in 1980, before the USFL even existed, they ruled with Cribbs and said that he could sign with the USFL. In 1984 in the USFL, he had over 1,400 yards and then had another 1,000-yard season in 1985. After the league folded, he did return to the Bills in 1986, but didn't have quite the season that he had before. He only averaged 3.3 yards per carry in 86. This is his last card with the Bills right here, the team leader card from 84. But he did have this 1986 card with the Bills, his final card, sorry, that would be it. And then in 1987, you can see that during the 86 season, he had signed with the San Francisco 49ers as a backup to Roger Craig. He also played with the Colts and Dolphins in 1988, but he only had 5 carries that whole year. So 87 was kind of the last time he really got much playing time. But a very, very talented player, and I really have wondered since then, you know, what would it have been if he had stayed with the Bills and just kept on that pace? You know, would we be talking more about him to this day? Maybe, I don't know. But a very talented player who had some really successful years during the first half of his career there. Next, we've got Scott Norwood, the infamous Scott Norwood for some. He's obviously best known for kicking that wide right field goal in Super Bowl 25, Bills versus Giants. That would have given the Bills their first and only Super Bowl victory. It was the closest they came out of those 4. Now, ProSet even made a little card of that, right? Norwood misses field goal, which is what, unfortunately for him, he's known for more than anything else. But he was a talented kicker. He was an undrafted free agent in 1982 with the Falcons, but he didn't make the team, and that's why he went over to the USFL and played for the Birmingham Stallions. He had 109 points in 1983, and then he only played 3 games in 1984, and then went on to play for the Bills from 85 to 91. His best season was 1988, and you can see the 1989 Topps card showing the 88 NFL scoring leaders Mike Kofer was the NFC leader, but Scott Norwood was the NFL leader that year in scoring. He was a Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro, and was also at one point the Bills' all-time scoring leader. After that missed kick in Super Bowl 25, he was back with the Bills for Super Bowl 26, and he made every kick that postseason, but he was still waived after the year. I kind of associate him with the movie Ace Ventura as well. The character Ray Finkel had a very similar storyline to that of Scott Norwood in the Super Bowl, at least on the field, maybe not so much off the field. But yeah, very happy to have his card. There were a handful of cards that I picked up on PSA a couple years back that I added to the collection that I felt were a pretty good deal. And because of his history in the NFL, that was one of those that I picked up at a pretty good price. Next up is Jim Smith, who had a pretty good career with the Steelers before signing with the USFL and really made a mark in the USFL. He was a third-round draft pick back in '77, where he was an All-American at Michigan. And the Steelers drafted him, and he spent 6 years with Pittsburgh. And he had 113 catches and 2 Super Bowl championships. His best year was 1980, where he had 37 catches for 711 yards. That's 23 yards per catch, which led the NFL. Let me see here. He had, so in 1982, he had 23 yards per catch, which led the NFL. In 1980, he had 19.2 yards per catch, so almost there. And in that Steelers offensive card right there, he was the leader in kickoff return average, so he was a return specialist as well, and in good company with Franco Harris and Mel Blount. So that's Jim Smith's rookie card, the 78 Topps right here in the middle. And like I said, he had some really good success with Pittsburgh. I really like that card, the in-action shot. He also had an 81 card. And his final card with the Steelers was this one right here in 1982. He had an offer from the Steelers with a contract that would make him the highest paid wide receiver, not only in the USFL, but it was more than any receiver in the NFL was making at the time. But he didn't disappoint. He's one of the all-time greats. 3 years, he had 3,559 yards, 227 catches, 31 touchdowns. In 1984, that was his best year, where he had almost 1,500 yards receiving, and he was a 2-time All-USFL player. He's also, and again, when we talk about like the all-time leaders, the all-time leader in USFL catches, yards, and touchdowns. He did finish his career with the Raiders in 1985. He played 6 games, had a touchdown, only caught a few passes, but he was absolutely great in the USFL. And I do want to mention, I know that there's the USFL again. This is all in reference to the original USFL, which had some higher name players, definitely, but just to make note of that. And now for another Pittsburgh Steeler, Cliff Stout. He was a 5th-round pick in '77 by the Steelers. He played 7 years there as a backup to Bradshaw, where he picked up 2 Super Bowl rings as the backup. His first start came in 1980, and he had a really good NFL debut. He threw for 310 yards, which especially in 1980, that was pretty impressive. In 1983, with Terry Bradshaw injured, he started almost the whole season. He started by going 9-2, but then the Steelers lost the final 4 games, and he only had 12 touchdowns, but 21 interceptions. The fans really turned on him. You know, after having Terry Bradshaw and all that success, Pittsburgh fans really did turn on him later in the year. There's actually a game back in 1984 with the Stallions back in week 3. It was the home opener for the Pittsburgh Maulers, and that was the only year that Pittsburgh had a USFL team. And so he was returning to Three Rivers Stadium, and the Steelers fans who were really soured on him, actually some of them threw snowballs at him and his team. It was kind of an infamous moment, and you can look it up online. It's out there on YouTube. And anyway, that game was the only sellout for the Pittsburgh USFL team, the Maulers, the whole year. So they definitely came out and they saw him play. Stout's team did win the game. He led them to a 30-18 victory there. And in fact, he went 27-9 in his 2 years, which was more wins than any other team during that period. He threw for 60 touchdowns with only 26 interceptions and had over 6,400 yards passing. He went on to the Cardinals in '86 and bounced around with Miami and Dallas, ending his career after the 1990 season. And we'll wrap things up with a couple of Chicago Bears. This is Vince Evans. He was a 6th-round draft pick by the Bears in '77 out of USC, just after coming off a Rose Bowl MVP performance. He started off as a backup. He wouldn't take a snap under center as a rookie, but he did actually return some kick returns. He had 13 returns and averaged about 20 yards a carry. By 1980, Evans started 10 games, and he started every game in 1981 with the Bears. That's his rookie card right there, the 81 Topps. Here's his 82 card as well. You'll see he was on the Blitz one year and then also on the Gold. In 1980, one thing that was pretty interesting, he became the first and I believe only Chicago Bear quarterback ever to have a perfect rating in a game. He went 18 of 22 for 316 yards with 3 touchdowns versus the Packers. And he had the potential right there, but he had 22 touchdowns, right? But he had 36 interceptions between 1980 and 81. So that's where the Bears decided to draft Jim McMahon at that point. So he became McMahon's backup, but McMahon, a couple times was injured, and so he would come in and he did well. He threw touchdown passes of 57 and 72 yards in 1983, but he really didn't like being on the bench, so he signed with the Chicago Blitz with Marv Levy as the head coach. He didn't do so well. They only went 5 and 13. He joined the Denver Gold after the Blitz folded for the '85 season and split time with a guy from my alma mater of Utah State, Bob Gagliano, and the team went 11 and 7. He didn't play football in '86 after the USFL folded, but in '87 he was given another chance. He went over to the Raiders. He ended up being there for many, many years. You can see that's a 1993 pro set. He was still there. So he did say, looking back, he regretted going over to the USFL and not sticking it out in the NFL. But definitely had a nice opportunity to come back and make some successful plays, have a few successful games with the Raiders. Last up is Doug Plank. He's well known to Bears fans. 12th round pick out of Ohio State in 1975. He only started 5 games at Ohio State, mostly as a backup and special teams player. But one of those 5 starts was as a senior versus Northwestern in Chicago, and a scout happened to be there and was so impressed that they took a chance on him in the 12th round. Not only did he make the team as a rookie, but he was in the starting lineup and led the team in tackles. And Bears defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan was so impressed with Plank for his ethic on the field and his aggressive play that as a result, he named his famous defense the 46 defense, which went on to a lot of notoriety and success in the Super Bowl. And there's Doug Plank, number 46. That was named after him, partially because of how much he loved Doug Plank and partially because of that pivotal position. And that 46 defense was all about attacking the quarterback. They were merciless with that. And so Doug Plank, that's kind of a mark for him for the Chicago Bears. He was one of 2 players, along with Gary Fensick, that were known as the Hitmen. And Fensick even mentions being part of the Hitmen as one of on the Super Bowl Shuffle. Plank played 1 year in the USFL for the Chicago Blitz, and he retired after the season. He's been a color commentator for the NFL and college football as well, and he did some coaching in the Arena League. But for me, it's all about, the 46 defense and the fact that it was named after him and his position, his number. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll be back with more of these in the near future. Go ahead and let me know any thoughts that you guys have about these players, the USFL, the set. Really appreciate you guys watching. I know these are a little longer, so definitely appreciate that. Hope you guys are all doing well, and take care.